Good morning, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of the Spartan Shadows podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chris. I'm joined with my co-host, Emmett, and today we have a special guest joining us for the mid-season, recap award show. We have the one and only Connor Muldowney joining us, our head honcho at Spartan Shadows, and the one of Twitter fame, of course, as well. So, Connor, thanks so much for taking some time and joining us, man.
I appreciate you having me. And Twitter fame is not what I want to be known for.
Yeah,
Which one of
it's
your 30 burners are you today, Connor?
yeah.
You'll find out, I guess, as the podcast goes. I might change 5 times.
There we go. Just update your username every few seconds to update your Twitter handles. But Connor has graciously enough joined us today, and we're just going to recap the season so far, football season, kind of recap or end our bye week, and just a little extra content before the Iowa game. So we appreciate you guys joining in. We'll start right there. Season, we're at the halfway mark. MSU, I don't know if we want to say underwhelming, overwhelming, right where we thought, but we're sitting here before Iowa. We started off with 3 good wins with Florida A&M, Prairie View, and Maryland, and then it's been a little rough sledding of late for the last 3 games with losses to Boston College, Ohio State, and Oregon. And was coming off the bye for Iowa homecoming. I'll throw it to Emmett first, but Emmett, where do you think we're sitting so far with thoughts on the season?
So overall, I think if you told us without explaining context of the games, if you told us 3-3 at the midway point of the year, a lot of us Spartan fans would say we'll take it. At the same time, looking at the context of the various games played, Maryland does not appear to be good. Likely firing Loxley is one of the main rumors. Boston College did not look great last night. They mounted a small comeback, went down 28-0, got to 28-21, but game finished 42-21. So overall, the teams that, the loss to Boston College is starting to look worse. Granted, that was a game where Aiden Childs had a lot of great plays and a lot of terrible plays. So it's the growing pains of a young quarterback. But overall, 3-3 is not horrible. None of us were realistically expecting a win against Ohio State or Oregon. And then Boston College and Maryland were both 50-50 games. We won one, lost the other. So overall, it's about what we expected. And we have saw signs of being competitive even against Oregon with that Nick Marsh catch and against Ohio State with the entire first half. So I would say I'm not disheartened and not hitting the panic button. There's just some of that woulda, coulda, shoulda about the Boston College game in particular. What about you, Connor?
I wouldn't say I'm overwhelmed. I wouldn't say I'm underwhelmed. I'm just whelmed. I think the team is a little better than I think we all expected. And, in years past, past 2 years, we probably see, this team probably loses to Ohio State by 50 and doesn't even have a fighting chance against Oregon. But both of those games, it felt like there was just a different vibe. Like they were in the game, like they had a chance to score first. They could have really, set the tone for the game, and that's not something that we've seen for a few years. They didn't look overwhelmed against Ohio State, which was really nice to see. They were, a few turnovers away from it being a fairly closer game, a decent game. Oregon, it just felt like, they could move the ball, but they could just never finish. That's kind of the story of the season so far. But I think that's why, Emmett said that's what happens when you have a young quarterback still going through growth, and it's just growing pains. I think they should be 4-2. I think we could all agree they should be 4-2 right now. So I'm not upset about it, and I also think that every single game in the second half of the season is very winnable. So I think we'll see just how high this team's potential is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Iowa and Michigan, when we started the season, you identified those as, tougher tests. We thought Indiana was going to be better than what they normally are, and they are. They're sitting there ranked and undefeated, but who have they played? Is it really are they for real? So we'll probably find out soon. Illinois also ranked, so tough test for sure, but I don't think any games necessarily a game like Ohio State or Oregon where you're coming in going, man, we've got to play perfect to win or even have a chance. So, yeah, I kind of echo all that sentiment. It's just not bad. It could be better, could be worse, definitely could be worse. So, growing pains with the team is part of having such a young team and really lack of depth too, because the injury bug has not been kind to us this year. And I think if we had our full complement of starters coming into the season, we might be in a little bit better of a spot. But looking at the 6 games left on the schedule, Connor, what, obviously Michigan aside for rivalry reasons, what's one of the games you're thinking might be the game to watch or look into maybe?
I like the Iowa game this weekend. I like that. I don't know. I don't know. The one game that I talked to Matt Sheehan earlier in the year, and he was telling me that someone had, percentages that we would like win certain games. And the Indiana game, it was only like 20%, and that was like in week 2 or week 3. And I want to see, the battle of the first year coaches. I want to see kind of who is really trending in the right direction and who's kind of like, I think Indiana's a mirage. Like you said, they have played nobody. I think they're better, but I would like to see like State kind of make a statement in that game and show that, when you play tough teams, that's going to happen. So that's the game, and maybe Illinois, but those two are really on my mind.
That'd be nice. Indiana always, for whatever reason, have issues with or crazy stuff happens, and so I'm kind of excited for that too, as maybe a measuring stick. And I don't know if Indiana's going to get exposed before they play us. I'm not sure who they have the next couple of weeks, but it's I'm on the same page. Kind of curious to see where they're actually at in their rebuild, and of course I like getting trophy games too, so can't hate that. How about you, Emmett? Any games sticking off the schedule for you for the rest of the year?
For sure, Indiana and Illinois, like you guys have said, Illinois did not look good in their win over Purdue, going to overtime, 50 to 49 final, I believe. So that game stands out because Purdue was not and has not been projected to be good the entire year, and they've lived up to that expectation from everything I saw. Granted, it's very likely they go and upset Oregon tonight just to spite us all because Purdue's going to Purdue.
Yep.
But also, yeah, Indiana and their lack of really playing anyone, that I'm curious how the Spartans are going to match up against that. We even saw it in their, I believe, 2020 when they had the resurgent year with Michael Penix at quarterback. That still was like 7-21 final, I believe. It was never a game that the traditional Tucker loss felt like, where we were completely out of it in the first half. So that is a game that we always play Indiana close and Michigan better than expected. So those two, obviously Michigan, you got the in-state rivalry, so we're trying to avoid that one. But, yeah.
Yeah. Michigan's obviously clearly the top game. It's the game of the schedule every year. So taking that out of context, I guess, out of play a little bit. What's the game you're most concerned about, Connor, if there is one? I know it's not the gauntlet of schedule, but
probably the Iowa game. I think that'll be a really big test to see just how much Childs has worked in the bye week. Like, Iowa's defense is not a joke. We saw that against Ohio State for a half, but they held Ohio State to 7 points or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So limiting turnovers, that's kind of my concern heading into that game, because Iowa's just going to be Iowa and just make things ugly and gross, and we might not move the ball very well. But that game kind of concerns me because 1st to 10 might win that game. So I hope that's us.
Yeah, I was sort of joking in my prediction on the Shadows podcast last night, the main episode that comes out today. We did our predictions for the game, and I was like, for once, I think this game is going to be high scoring. I don't know why. There's no sense behind it, but I think I said 30-27 final, and that might be the most high scoring MSU Iowa game in years. So, yeah, it's 1st to 10 also is very possible.
Yeah, Iowa's my main concern as well. They have probably one of the best defenses besides maybe Michigan, that we're going to see the rest of the season. Additionally, they probably have the best running back we will see the rest of the year with Caleb Johnson getting second round hype, I believe, last I checked.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, Johnson is on pace for a 1,900-yard year, so that is definitely the main thing that stands out to me as a concern. Because Jordan James, while a great running back for Oregon, he's not on the same level as Caleb Johnson. And Jordan James was out-yarding the Spartans at half in the Oregon game.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, Iowa defense always has been good. This year is no different. 15 sacks on the year, 7 interceptions. I believe the offensive front for MSU is going to have a lot to deal with to try to keep Childs clean in the pocket. And that's before you factor in Childs is going to have to play a great game in order to try to lead the Spartans to an upset this weekend.
Yeah, I think Iowa and Michigan have pretty similar play styles this year, which is kind of weird to say because you think Michigan coming off a national championship and their 10-win seasons and all that stuff, and Iowa's not been anywhere close to that, but really good defense, like to run the ball, not so great quarterback play. Caden McNamara is a little bit better than whatever Michigan's got going on currently, but not by much, I guess I would say. So should be an interesting. Yeah, it should be an interesting couple weeks, I guess, coming up for our offense, anyways. So that's about all the preview. I know that it's hard with the schedule being what it is and where we're at. Kind of just being average, years with rebuilds. It's hard to really talk about being super excited, underexcited, So, any final thoughts on the rest of the season before we get into the midterm awards, Connor? I don't know if you got any other things to look out for, or maybe players you want to watch, or anything like that.
I first of all, I want to see more Nick Marsh and Jack Velling,
Yes.
And I want to see Childs I want to see a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio in the second half, at least. In the last 6 games, I want to see him hit, maybe throw 15 touchdown passes. Is that too much? That doesn't seem like crazy. 15 touchdowns in the last 6 games to 6 interceptions.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
He's at 5 and 8 right now, so 5 touchdowns, 8 picks. So
not great.
No, I will say I think the decision making's been better, but
way better. Last 2 games against elite teams, he's looked, smart, way smarter with the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, besides his 1 interception to Burke, which was, I believe, his only, I think Justin Thind posted a statistic of, according to PFF, that was his only interceptable pass in the last 2 games. Granted, it's 1 step forward, 1 step back, with, he had 2 fumbles in those games, too. I mean, Ohio State was ripping his face mask off.
Yeah,
I will give him that benefit of the doubt, but Oregon, the goal line fumble, obviously, a lot more inexcusable.
Yeah, the team in general, we kind of touched about this last night, Emmett, but the team in general, I think, has been a little bit more careless with hanging onto the ball. So overall, I'd like to see the turnovers cut down, not just picking on Aiden, but as a team, just some of the turnovers and the costly penalties that plague this throughout the start of the year. I will say the penalties have been better too, but man, those drive killers where you start moving the ball and all of a sudden you're getting the personal fouls or the holding and you're back behind the yard or line of scrimmage again. It's just tough to overcome when you don't have a lot of talent or depth to replace it with. So
our turnover margin has been horrible this year. I think we're the worst in the Big Ten and 118th in the country or something.
Yes.
We have to force turnovers too. We're not forcing any except for, I don't know. Interceptions maybe. I don't remember forcing a fumble and actually recovering it this year.
Yeah, but I mean,
Boston College holiday.
Yeah, and a lot of the interceptions we first were against Prairie View. I'll say Prairie View. I'm not trying to dog anybody, but
Prairie View and Florida Atlantic were the only times I really remember good interceptions.
But one thing it's kind of been brought up this week too, and I know how Emmett's felt with it. How do you feel about only us being able to record 1 practice during the bye week? good thing to help rest, bad thing rust and not getting reps? What you thinking on that?
I think like getting everybody refreshed and kind of getting that time away is a good thing for sure. One practice is a little surprising, but like also, I don't know. Thinking back to when I played and when we had a bye week, I was like, I don't want to go anywhere near a field. I just need to like mentally reset. And I know college football is a different beast, so a lot of these guys are playing college football for the first time and kind of need that mental reset. So I think that's a good thing, but that worries me slightly about rust. But I do think it'll be good mentally for the team.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about rust. The other concern I have is after the Oregon performance, where I believe we had nearly 15 missed tackles as a team, 10 of them from one player. The tackling needs to get cleaned up, and proceeding a game with 15 missed tackles with one practice the entire week is very concerning for me. That was another thing that was brought up to me by a former player too. So I am
What if we
concerned
just
about
sent
that.
that one player to practice by himself?
That's what he's been doing all bye week is just tackling drills on the side.
Give him a tackling dummy, Makes, yeah.
Tackling dummy and maybe some gloves.
Maybe. Oh, well, now we added the player.
Well, we always joke with Matt Seibert about like if somebody fumbles, if I was AD, I'd put out like an all points bulletin to campus and make him carry a football to class and stuff, and just say anybody who can get the ball from him, reverse it. Let's do the same thing and say if you see this player on campus, have him tackle you, and if he's able to bring you to the ground, he'll get extra reps or some sort of NIL money.
How could that go wrong?
It's fine. Sign a waiver. We're good. Uh,
Full
so
campus signs a waiver. Yeah, that'll go over well.
hey, our fans do a lot for the team. I'm sure they'd be ecstatic. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I don't really have anything else about what to expect for the season. So we can transition into midseason awards. The categories we had talked about were offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, midseason MVP, newcomer of the year, most improved player of the year so far, and then the unsung hero. For the fans listening, we did newcomer of the year instead of just freshman of the year because we felt if we did a freshman of the year, that would just be runaway Nick Marsh award. And we did want to generate a little bit of debate maybe. So we decided to welcome all newcomers. So with a roster chocked full of transfer players, I figured that would be a good way to do it. So we'll start with our gracious boss here. What are your categories and answers for those, Connor?
Do you want me to run through all of them, or are we doing like one at a time through?
Yeah, we probably should do one at a time. That's probably
Go through
good.
one at a time.
Offensive player of the year. Who you thinking for that?
We were talking before the show, and it's so hard to come up with an offensive player that's like really stood out. So I'm gonna go with one that's been the most exciting, I guess, and I'm just gonna say Nick Marsh because he's actually given the offense like a shot in the arm. You could say Childs minus the turnovers. You could say a few other guys, but I think Nick Marsh has been the most exciting. So I'm just gonna go with a cheap one.
Perfect. I mean, he's fit. He's been a lightning bolt. Sad he had to deal with that little injury bug of late, but overall he's been a breath of fresh air for the offense. Emmett, I'll turn it over to you for offensive player of the year, and I know you have Zach's answers too. We didn't want to leave Zach out. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us for this, so if you want to read yours and Zach's, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so for Zach, his offensive player of the year, he also said Nick Marsh, which, unsurprising, Marsh is leading the team with, I believe, 320 receiving yards
Yep.
through the first half of the year after missing a game. Then for me, I would say it's a mix of either Nick Marsh, no surprise there, or K'Ron Lynch-Adams. He's provided a spark at the running back room. He has 330. He's averaging 5 yards a rush, 2 touchdowns, and 338 yards on the ground this year. Not bad considering the lack of a run game we've been able to get against Ohio State and Oregon. So I think he could have a really big second half of the year as well. But even just looking at the first half, he's provided that spark we need to complement Nate Carter.
Yeah, I like both of those. I wanted to go a little bit different because while Nick and Kayron, two obvious choices, Aiden as well. Um, I wanted to identify a player who's played in all of the games, been a consistent player in all of the games, haven't had a lot of ups and downs. Would also probably qualify in the unsung hero category, but I think Tanner Miller has been just as advertised at the center position and being a leader on the offensive line and really just being anything we could have asked for. Unfortunately, our offensive line's been pretty hampered with injuries, but he's been that one consistent player week in and week out and able to help out as much as possible. So, and then of course, moving from the West Coast over to Michigan's a big transition. So doing that and still being a consistent player is pretty awesome to see. So I'll give Tanner some dues for my category there. Switching it over to defensive player of the year. This is where we're going to see a lot of repeat answers for a couple categories, I would imagine. Connor, who you got for defensive player of the year?
Charles Brantley, but I was considering Jordan Turner just because he was so good against Ohio State that like that game sticks in my head. But I gotta go Brantley. He's just been so consistent and like a massive surprise this year.
I completely agree with Connor. I also had Charles Brantley with an honorable mention, Jordan Turner. Brantley has 3 interceptions on the year, including 4 interceptions if you include his pick 6 that got called back. 3 interceptions. One of them was the 100-yard pick 6 against Prairie View. Additionally, he has 5 passes defensed on the season. Against Ohio State and Oregon, he was locking down his half of the field. I believe he allowed 3 catches the entire game, was the entire span of 2 games. Then Turner was everywhere against Ohio State, like Connor said. I believe he had the highest individual linebacker grade since Jack Campbell in like 2021, 2022 against the Buckeyes as a linebacker. So if it, in a non-Brantley takeover year, I would say it's a runaway for Turner. As it is, Brantley, we probably should enjoy the final 6 or 7 games we're going to see of him because I think he's in the NFL next year.
Yeah, I think he's played well enough to warrant that as well. Who did Zach have for his defensive player of the year?
I believe Zach had Brantley as well for his defensive player of the year.
And I will make it the clean sweep for Chuck because I agree. He's been at a position we kind of identified going into the season as one that's going to need to step up a little bit. He's been the best corner and the best player in the secondary and just been really consistent all year. So like we said, he's kind of played himself into that NFL category this year. So getting good for Chuck too because he's had a lot of ups and downs while he's been here. And so glad to see his hard work is paying off, and kudos for sticking it out when he had every opportunity to leave multiple times and considered it too. So good to see him getting his dues. So mid-season MVP, this I have a feeling might be another majority for one player, but Connor, who do you have here?
I switched it up because I didn't want to be the same. So I originally wanted to do Jonathan Kim, but I'm speaking this one into existence because I want this to happen. But Aiden Childs, just because, he's been that on and off field leader. He has a turnover problem. He's been very open about being aware of that, and we don't win that Maryland game without him. He's probably, I don't know if we have a quarterback or if there is a quarterback who could dodge would-be sackers as much as Childs does, but he's running for his life a lot, and he's a lot of the bad plays are results of him trying to play hero ball, but I think he's going to clean that up, and we've seen that. He's the captain of the ship. I'm just going to go with him because I want to see it happen in the second half, so I'm just going to say Childs.
Yeah, that's fair. Zach and I both have Chuck Brantley as the midseason MVP. I mean, he has been locked down on corner. Jonathan Kim is also a good answer. The fan vote, additionally, we got 125 responses. I had a Twitter poll up last week. Chuck Brantley was the runaway favorite. I believe he collected 80% of the votes. And then second place was a tie between Childs and K'Ron Lynch-Adams. A couple write-ins for Jordan Turner and Jonathan Kim as well. So, yeah, I believe the fans are pretty united in the whole Chuck has been amazing this year. What about you, Chris?
So I'm going to switch it up last second too. I was going to go Chuck, and I don't want to maybe discredit him because, as I just said, he's been probably the most important player. But I also want to give this award right now to Nick Marsh because our offense, as rough as it looked at times, imagine it without Nick Marsh right now. He's came from true freshman who we all thought was going to be talented and playing in a few years consistently to our best offensive weapon and really kind of carrying the load offensively. Receiver room itself has been subject to some injuries, Nick including that, but leading receiver, he was named as a midseason All-American, freshman All-American. So he's getting the love he deserves, and I got to give him a little bit of a shout out. One of my favorite players on the team. Is awesome to watch. He's a great kid, and I think he deserves some kudos in this little discussion here too. So I'll go with Nick Marsh. Newcomer of the year. We'll go with that one next. Connor?
Shocker. I have Nick Marsh for this one. And there's a few guys that could probably win this one, but I think like you were just saying that, Marsh has been kind of what the offense has needed, and he's kind of picked it up when it's been down a little bit. And he's Childs' favorite target, so I'm gonna go with him just because he has been the most exciting, been the most explosive, and he's probably got the brightest future of most people on the team, I want to say.
Yeah. Zach, for his newcomer of the year, he has Jordan Turner, which Turner is a guy that I was leading towards as well. Turner is the team leader in tackles. Believe he's the team leader in sacks as well, or tied for it with Chris Bogle. Turner has definitely provided a lot of a spark to the linebacker room. I honestly agree. I think Turner is our newcomer of the year. I will give honorable mentions to two players, though. Nick Marsh, like Connor and Chris have both said, he's provided that spark for the offense, and also Tanner Miller as a newcomer of the year on the offensive line. Without him, I do not want to imagine how our line would look, considering the injuries and woes we've had this year with them.
Yeah, I agree. And really the transfers that Jonathan Smith brought over from Oregon State, all of them have been, I think, pretty good to great in some aspects, but it's hard to say because a lot of the offensive weapons, it's hard to say they're playing really great when the offense overall hasn't been the best. So it's just one of those things. I think all of the transfers are doing really well. I want to highlight a transfer for my newcomer of the year, but it's not one of the ones that came from Oregon State. It is Jordan Turner. He's been our best linebacker, I think, in my opinion, which is hard because I thought Jordan Hall would take that crown most of the year. Jordan Turner has been pretty consistent, a breath of fresh air. He was everywhere in the Ohio State game, everywhere. And so I think he's been a really good revelation. And you're seeing him getting a lot of love for NFL draft talk and placement too. And so not that that's necessarily imminent or anything, but he's
Lions.
Yeah, he would be perfect for the Lions. I would love that. So
Buy my jersey right away. Lions, you'll take my money.
yes, absolutely. That would be great. So hopefully not anytime soon, though. We'll keep him in East Lansing as long as we can. But I got to shout out Jordan Turner for that. Next one we have most improved. Connor, where you at for that?
I had Brantley for that one for obvious reasons. I think a lot of people were a little bit like down on Brantley over the past few years, and he had that interception against Michigan his freshman year that kind of put him on the map. But then it was kind of like an up and down career, and he flirted with the portal 10 times, and then he came back. but he's been so consistent and so good this year that he's like a completely new player under Demetrius Martin and I can't even think of, but like the new coaching staff is really they've really fixed him, and it's been nice to watch.
Yeah, I'll also say Chuck Brantley. Not going to switch it up. There's only really I can only think of one other player who I would say for most improved. But before I get to that, yeah, like Connor said, Brantley, completely different player. Missed 9 games last year with an injury, so we also didn't really know what to expect out of him coming into the season. He has been a revelation at corner. It's just been a matter of the various defensive back injuries on the other half that have made our passing numbers look a little more like they were under the Tucker era. But overall, Brantley has had an amazing year. I will give an honorable mention to Chris Bogle. He is tied for the team lead in sacks. Has finally been able to stay healthy most of this year, which was the main concern we saw the last 2 seasons of Bogle. So the only reason I won't be giving it to Bogle over Brantley is due to it's been hard to find him or any of the defensive line on the field the last 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely. What was Zach's most improved?
I think, to the surprise of everyone, Zach's most improved player was Brantley.
Yep. And we'll call it a clean sweep for Chuck again. My most improved. I thought about potentially giving it to Jordan Hall, which Jordan Hall had a really good year last year, so it's hard to think that he's most improved, but he's looked a lot better too. And so I think Jordan Hall is going to be a center point of the defense for a long time. So I did want to shout him out, but Chuck, for all the reasons we've stated, and we could state the same thing over and over again, Chuck's most improved. And yeah, it was a pretty easy choice for me. So unsung hero, we'll finish up with that one. Connor, who you got for that one?
I went with Tanner Miller just because, like you said earlier, that offensive line without him would be scary. He's kind of holding everybody together right now, and he's been consistent, and offensive linemen don't get a lot of love, so I gotta go Miller.
Yeah, Zach, for his unsung hero, he went also on the line, but on the defensive front, he went Maverick Hansen. Hansen has been provided a spark against the run for us this year. Pulling up stats, he has 8 credited tackles on the year, but that does not really describe what Mav's game is. He's more of a people eater in the middle to prevent huge runs. We saw it against Ohio State after he went down with an injury. Literally the first snap after Hansen was off the field was a 32-yard rush to Travion Henderson. So Hansen definitely makes sense as our unsung hero. For me, I have Jonathan Kim. Kim has been perfect on field goals this year, including the basic game winner with 1 second left against Maryland. I would also like to shout out Bogle in this category as well, second on the team tackles for loss, tied for the team lead in sacks. In under the radar year after he had a hot start, and not many people have mentioned him after that Florida Atlantic game. He's quietly provided spark in that new edge rusher role in Joe Rossi's system.
For me, I have 2, and one's kind of I don't want to say a cop-out answer, but one is off the radar. For the player, I think that is the unsung hero. I'm going to shout out punter extraordinaire Ryan Eckley. We are Punter U for a reason. I've dubbed us that, but moving forward, it's just true. We just produce good punters. Ryan Eckley is no exception, averaging 48 yards a punt. Looks like a game changer sometimes on the special teams front, and everybody says, he's a punter, he doesn't do a lot. I get the punter hate in general, but having a weapon like that to flip the field, pin teams back, it goes without being stated how important that can be, especially to help your defense out and make it a little bit easier in the field position battle. I think Ryan Eckley's been great this year. The other one I had is not a player. It's Courtney Hawkins. I just wanted to shout him out. And along with Coach Meat, too, Demetrius Martin. Those 2 position coaches have been outstanding. I really think the coaching staff in general has done really well so far. And I don't really want to leave like Jonathan Smith and Joe Rossi and Brian Lingard out. But Courtney Hawkins, what he's done consistently with the wide receivers throughout the Mel Tucker era and into now, can't be overstated. He's the reason Nick Marsh stayed here when Mel Tucker was fired. He's the reason so many wide receivers in the NFL currently say they're there. I mean, Jaden Reed gave like a 5-minute interview on the St. Brown Brothers podcast last week about just basically a love fest for Coach Hawk, and he said he wouldn't be where he was today without him. So I think that each receiver class that comes through, you have probably 3 or 4 guys that just owe most of their success to Coach Hawk, and this one isn't any different. Nick Marsh has the most glowing reviews about him. Mama Tron has glowing reviews about him. I've heard AZ Johnson say great things about him. Just you name it, Coach Hawk is always being praised for his work, and we've talked about how much better the secondaries look this year, and Coach Mead has had a big part in that, so I wanted to shout those two out as coaching unsung heroes. But player, definitely got to give Ryan Eckley the nod, and yeah, that's, I think, where the other guys I just felt like I needed to shout out the most on there. So yeah, that's what we have for midseason awards. Either of you guys have any other players or any coaches or anything you wanted to give some time to before we wrap this up?
I think Jack Velling deserves a little bit of a shout out. He's kind of stepped his game up. He's looked a lot better, over the past few games. And I just want to see, Childs do a little more in the second half, and I think he wants that for himself. So that's all I got.
Yeah, I'll also look at the tight end room. Michael Masunas, until his season-ending injury, he had provided a spark the first 2 games of the year. Really helped us through the Florida Atlantic game when none of the offense could get a spark. Had 29 receiving yards, which led the team. That's another issue, but then he also provided a clutch block on one of the late deep shots to Nick Marsh to help us win against Maryland. And then additionally, for a coaching shout-out, I'll give another shout-out to a defensive back coach with Blue Adams, the co-defensive back coach with Coach Meat. So both of those two have completely revamped the secondary after the first-class priority zone that was the Tucker years.
Yeah. Well, that should wrap it up for midseason awards, midseason preview. Maybe we can get Connor back on at the end of the season to recap all this and see how accurate or inaccurate we were. Before I do let you go, Connor, I know I've said it to you off, but I got to say it on there. We really appreciate you giving us the chance to do this. We have a blast doing it and writing for Shadows and doing all the fun stuff we've got to do so far. And it wouldn't have happened without him. So there's the face that stirs the pot. So we got to give Connor the dues. So we really appreciate it. And thanks for letting us be a part of all this.
It's as much me as it is you guys. So I appreciate you guys being on the team, and I'm excited to see where this thing goes.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do more with it. Emmett?
Thank you, Connor, for giving us all this chance. It's helped me start a career with the credentialed media. So very excited to see where that goes, and also very excited to see where this podcast goes. It's been a blast the first half of the year.
Yep. You and Ant have done a lot, so we gotta shout you out when you guys can. That would Ant Wright for those who don't know who I'm talking about. Big MSU man, known Big Michigan MSU State supporter. So, of course, if you want to give Ant some love on social media, everybody follow him at It's Ant Wright. Sorry, tongue twister there. And then Connor, where can we find you in the Twitter? Where can't we find you in the Twitter sphere? But where if somebody wants to give you a follow, where should they find you?
It's at Connor Muldowney on Twitter, and I would spell that, but it's too long, and you don't need to follow me. But
you'll see it. Just look at any Michigan fans account. You'll probably see about four mentions of Connor.
If you see tweeting, it's probably me. I have endless burners. So
yeah, absolutely.
Do we need to dedicate a 30-minute segment to how many burners you got?
Yeah, we could. We honestly could. I'll give you a backstory on each one too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we appreciate taking the time to come hang out with us, but yeah, that's all we have for you guys. A little bonus episode dropping before the Iowa game, so we appreciate everybody following and supporting. And then check us out on social media. We'll have more for you next week. So, Connor, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate you. And Yeah,
Go
not a
Green.
problem. Go green.
Go white.